Please welcome to the stage Natalia Martinez-Kalinina of the NMK Group and our esteemed panel.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to what is a very timely topic of discussion. I hope we can all agree that supporting and scaling entrepreneurs in Latin America is a cornerstone pillar for driving sustained economic growth in the region. I have certainly personally witnessed venture capital and other sources of private funding in Latin America begin to increase in recent years, but many structural, economic, and political challenges remain in encouraging both nascent and scaling entrepreneurs to grow in the region. With this larger context in mind, today we will discuss specifically the role of public and private partnerships in bridging this gap. So to do so, we have the privilege of being joined by Sam Stevens, directly to my right, Executive Director of the AB InBev Foundation, Catalina Garcia, Global Director of Corporate Affairs for Anheuser-Busch InBev, and Jessica Bedoya, Chief of Staff and Chief Strategy Officer for the Inter-American Development Bank, IDB for most of us. So thank you, all three of you, for joining us. We're excited for this conversation. Jessica, let's start with you. So help us set the stage. Tell us how the IDB is working to increase economic opportunity in Latin America.
Great, thank you. And it's a pleasure to share this stage with all of you today and with the audience that we have here. The Inter-American Development Bank at its core has a development mission. And what we do every day, day in and day out, is work with governments and the private sector to be that bridge between both stakeholders to ensure that we can provide investment in the region. So what does that mean? We provide financing to governments to do your traditional infrastructure development projects, to do water and sanitation, build bridges, everything that you can think about in terms of transportation, healthcare, and every sector under the sun. But also what we do is work with the private sector, and that's why I'm glad that we're sharing the stage with our partners, AB InBev, because by building that bridge, we crowd in institutional investors, we crowd in philanthropic foundations, we crowd in everyone who is willing to work in Latin America and the Caribbean to have the reach and the impact that we want. So for us, public and private is a synergy that you can't divorce one from the other, because without it, you won't have the development impact and the success that we want to see in the region. At the IDB, we have 26 member countries across Latin America and the Caribbean. We have a footprint across the entire region, including Asia and Europe. And our goal and our focus is to provide that financing. For example, just in the last year, we provided $4.5 billion in financing on climate change alone, because for us, climate is jobs. Climate is an opportunity for economic growth and prosperity. We provided $1 billion in financing for small and medium-sized enterprises. We work a lot with financial intermediaries to ensure that women-led SMEs in particular have that access to financing, because that $100 million gap, the $1 trillion gap in climate, we're there to fill those financial gaps the best way that we can. Now, governments can't do it alone. That's why we're here to help as a multilateral development finance institution, but also that's why the private sector is here to fill that gap, because what we want is to institutionalize those development solutions. Not only have a holistic solution to the development challenges in the region, but make sure that they stick. So the IDB is here to work with partners. We have a private sector coalition that is immensely popular. We have over 160 partners right now, and among them is AB InBev and others. And we want to grow that even more. So I want to make a clarion call and a message here to all of you that are listening today. Please join the IDB in this partnership so that we can have that impact on the ground that we want to see. We have millions of people who have dropped from the middle class in Latin America because of COVID into poverty. And we need to address that. And the longer that we wait to find those holistic solutions is the longer that they struggle to make their day-to-day ends meet. So we have to think about that as we frame the discussion of public-private partnerships. It's not just about the bottom line as we sit here in New York. It's about those families that are trying to feed the children, the women who are struggling to put food on the table, to make sure their kids get to school and don't have to have a zero-sum choice of go to school or go earn $1 so that their family can survive. Those are the challenges and the questions that we face at the IDB day in and day out, and those are also the questions that the private sector actors that we work with and partner with are facing as they try to deploy their tools and leverage and mobilize capital so that we can all be part of the solution.
Thank you.
Sure.
And to follow up on that, so public-private partnerships are notoriously a complex puzzle. What have you seen be particularly fruitful in the region, and what is missing from your estimation to strengthen that Venn diagram?
There is a lack of trust. There is an inherent lack of trust in the region between the public and private sectors. And that's why at the IDB, we're doing our best to bring stakeholders around the table to have that dialogue. We have ourselves financed a lot of successful PPP projects in Colombia. There have been several toll roads where we've worked and built public-private financing structures that have been quite successful. But inherent to the structure is the concept of trust, making sure that governments know their limits and private sector know when to come in. And behind all of that, what we do at a very technical level is ensure that the design of the project from end to end is as transparent as possible, that all of the stakeholders have an equal say at the table in terms of not only the design, but the impact and the outcome. And also that eventually there's that buy-in from both sides, right? Because for projects to work in the region, both governments need it to succeed and have to want it to succeed, as well as the private sector, without abandoning it midway. So what we're trying to do ourselves is also improve our role in that end-to-end process to ensure that we don't abandon it midway through. We need to see the results, and the results are ensuring that the dialogues continue, that there's trust, that there's transparency, that the best practices that we are all familiar with and we all talk about all of the time, especially in infrastructure in Latin America and the Caribbean, we're doing our best to improve, to make sure that those sectors are strengthened coming out of the PPPs that we're financing, or else we're not really doing our job.
Thank you. Well, Cata, switching over to you, tell us how your work empowers small and medium-sized businesses in the region.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the invitation to be here. At AB InBev, we work very closely with our partners and communities across our value chain. These are our customers, around 6 million in the world, 40 million in Latin America. The suppliers, 50,000, smallholder farmers, 20,000. So we support them through our business platforms. We have entrepreneurship as one of our most important pillars of our ESG strategy. It's all about value creation. For example, we use our new e-commerce platform, which is called Bees, to connect with the customers, to facilitate the way we do business with them, but also it's a platform that allows them to receive training on how to manage their business in a more efficient way, from paper bookkeeping to do digital solutions, providing also financial services through partnerships with the IDB, with the foundation, and other organizations that are helping us to make sure these small businesses, the customers, grow and are sustainable. If they are growing, our business grows. So it's value creation, it's share value, so we ensure that the shareholders receive a return that is not sacrificing the future for the present. So at the end, we generate social and economic development. Beer, as an industry, is a massive contributor to GDP globally, to jobs, to taxes. So, but this is only possible because we work in partnership with the governments, with development banks, different multilateral organizations, NGOs, with the academic sector that is also helping us assess our work, measure the impact of what we are doing. We usually start small, we test the different interventions, and then from that evaluation, we learn what works, and then we partner to scale up, for example, with the United Nations doing many projects as well. So that's the way we work.
Thank you. Can you, just to double click a little bit on that last part, there's obviously a very strong economic development through line through what the programs that you mentioned and the approach that you mentioned. How is that bridged into a larger scaling of impact throughout the region?
Yeah, definitely. What we're doing now is all of the projects that we already started several years ago, we already know what works, and we are in a stage of accelerating digital inclusion. So with that acceleration, and because of the pandemic that at the end set us back many years, but the digital inclusion and innovation accelerated somehow, that's the way we can scale up and provide all these solutions using technology, using financial services as well, and bringing others that help us really drive this change and social impact. And again, when I said UN, we partner with the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, and they are able to codify this knowledge and experience, produce toolkits, and bring it across the world through their centers of training to the governments and the different organizations based on what we have experienced at the field with the business, with our customers, with our consumers, with our suppliers.
Thank you. Sam, last but not least, tell us a bit about the foundation's work in the region, and if you can, what you've seen on the ground work in terms of supporting entrepreneurship as an economic development tool.
Absolutely. Great question, Natalia. Thank you so much for moderating today, and thank you, good friends Jessica and Kata, and amazing partners with AB InBev and IDB. At the AB InBev Foundation, we are focused on catalyzing sustainable progress for the Sustainable Development Goals. And that means finding the neglected issues and coming up with innovative solutions to fill gaps, avoid duplication, and lead to long-term sustainable progress. Well, for us, it makes sense to focus on things like public health, things like water, particularly sustainable water access, sustainable agriculture, humanitarian response, and underpinning all of that is women's empowerment and entrepreneurship. Because we believe that entrepreneurship is one of the most fundamental ways that the world is going to come close to or hit achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Because investing in entrepreneurs means investing in wealth creation, it means investing in economic development, it means finding communities that don't have opportunities to otherwise access the playing field and giving them the chance to reach that first rung of development. That's the approach that we're taking. And we like to think, imagine all the people in the world today. The solutions to our problems exist in the minds of people around the world today. The challenge is getting those individuals the opportunities that they need to bring their ideas to fruition. So that's why we believe entrepreneurship is so powerful, not just for creating wealth and economic development, but for coming up with societal solutions to some of the greatest challenges that the world is facing today. But as a philanthropy, we can't do it alone. We rely on public-private partnerships or multilateral partnerships, multi-sectoral partnerships even, to find complementing strengths. The great thing about a partnership like one with IDB and AB InBev Corporate is that the foundation has strengths, but we don't have the capabilities that a development bank does or the resources that a corporate does. And so we're able to intentionally come together and find challenges that need new solutions and bring our individual strengths to the table, avoid duplication, amplify our impact, and thereby hopefully help the world get that much closer to achieving the SDGs.
Thank you. So you mentioned innovation, which obviously overlaps, has a large overlap with entrepreneurship, but is not exactly the same thing. So I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit of how you think public-private partnerships can help foment innovation, not just entrepreneurship in the region.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And innovation is such a tricky buzzword, right? Sometimes I say innovation, I see people nodding, and sometimes I say innovation, I see people grimacing. But whatever your feelings about the word innovation might be, I think finding opportunities to test out new ideas. Because we know that there are solutions out there today that work, but maybe they're not efficient at scale, or maybe they aren't efficient in achieving the same results in different locations. And so what's great about multi-sectoral partnerships is you can find opportunities to test things. Maybe the corporate will test something that makes sense within their value chain, that makes sense within their portfolio of customers, but doesn't make sense to scale beyond that perhaps. There's no ROI for shareholders. Well, we can work with a development bank and bring technical resources to scale to help expand that beyond that consumer base. And so when we say innovation, we really think it's important to take some risks, to try new solutions, because that's what it's going to take to find the things that you can scale, that you can take worldwide, and ultimately achieve the SDGs. Thank
you. Well, Sam, you earlier in your answer already walked us through a bit of your perspective on public-private partnerships and SDGs. So Jessica and Kata, I'm curious for your thoughts on how you think public-private collaborations and that intersection can help drive progress towards the SDGs over the next chunk of years.
Sure. I'm happy to take that first. That's a great question, because that's the question we're all asking ourselves here as we're gathered for ONGO Week. Another year has gone by, and the region, Latin America and the Caribbean, is definitely lagging in terms of attaining the SDG goals. And that's something, again, that we debate internally at the IDB in terms of how can we better crowd in and better strengthen the public-private connectivity, that connective tissue that is required to achieve those goals. I think setting the SDGs were important because it gives us pillars and guidelines that countries have KPIs now that they can say, okay, we've met this metric, we haven't met that metric. But what is the next step in terms of obtaining the results that they want to see? We need to identify what those vacuums are. What are those gaps? We need countries and private sector and public sector alike, and development institutions, we need to say, okay, this is where we actually didn't do it well. We need to at first admit what we're not doing well to be able to find the solution and fix it so we can better take corrective action. We have SDGs that we're supposed to obtain between now and 2030, and that's going to take a lightning speed of catching up to admit what our failures have been to date so we can correct for them, and then taking those steps quickly together as a collective, as a coalition, to see how we can better implement the solutions we've implemented or how to take better risks. Quite frankly, the IDB for a very long time was very risk averse, and something that we've been changing and I'm really proud of for the last 2 years is taking that risk by sitting here today and saying, you know, we haven't done our job to the best of our ability as a development institution. We're working on it, we're employing more innovative solutions, we're working with the private sector much more closely to do that. So how do you obtain the SDGs? You have to identify metrics that are measurable over time, admit what isn't being done so you can correct for those actions, and then really quickly speed up the solutions and be innovative in those ideas with the private sector.
For AB InBev, the SDGs are in the center of everything we do. This year, we sharpened our ESG strategy with a focus on 8 pillars. First of all, responsible drinking. Second, entrepreneurship, diversity and inclusion, ethics, and 4 environmental pillars that are around climate change, water, agriculture, circular packaging. But how do SDGs fit in that business strategy? It is very simple. If we don't take care about our customers and make them thrive and provide them with the solutions they need to grow, our business is not sustainable. As simple as saying, if there's no water, no beer. Without barley, no beer. So we cannot do this alone. This is very important for us. We are part of the solution. We bring partners together. For example, we partner with the TNC, the Nature Conservancy. We released a 7-step process for watershed management, working with the communities, ensuring water sustainability, as well with the developing entrepreneurs, as I mentioned before, with, of course, the IDB Foundation, other organizations, the UN, and experts in measuring impact that will allow us to really learn that the impact we are generating is positive.
Thank you. Well, as we start to wrap up our panel, I think we're also starting to wrap up the year. We're entering kind of the last quarter of 2022. So when you look at the year ahead, what is next, or what is the focus of your strategic agenda? It's a question for the panel. Please go ahead.
I'm happy to start. So we're looking at how we can improve our internal processes at the IDB. When I mentioned Synergies earlier, I say that because at the IDB, another issue that I'm very proud to raise at this point is that we're actually improving how we're providing solutions to governments. The IDB was very siloed before, the solutions were very diffuse, they weren't well coordinated or very strategic. And we're taking steps very concretely internally to ensure that our public sector arm and our private sector arm are walking hand in hand, and that those pipelines are in sync, so that every dollar that the IDB puts forward in Latin America and the Caribbean is to strengthen a market or sector that we have identified as an opportunity for investment and economic growth and development over the long term. And bringing in the private sector, those institutional investors and others who want to come in and finance projects in that sector. So we're strengthening sectors while building bankable projects. And I'm really proud of that work, and that's what we're looking forward to strengthening in the year ahead.
Thank you for sharing.
From the business perspective, at AB InBev, we want to continue accelerating this digital transformation that we started years ago. Definitely, that will really take us to a next level. We will use our large footprint in more than 50 countries, selling our products in more than 150. And today, half of our business, the revenue, comes from the digital business. So how can we use those platforms, those technologies, to support the development, social and economic development, and the achievement of the SDGs.
Thank you.
And really quickly at the foundation, we're wrapping up a brand new strategy that sees us pivoting to become a leader in filling those philanthropic white spaces to achieve the SDGs. So we're finding ways to catalyze not just sustainable progress, but to focus on systems change, addressing root causes of issues, finding ways to localize philanthropy more from a corporate perspective. And so we're excited to work alongside our partners to be more focused, to be more strategic, and ultimately be more impactful as a result.
Thank you. Well, lots to look forward to. Well, on that note, thank you all for joining. Thank you, Jessica, Kata, and Sam, for a brief but dense conversation. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.